Good evening and welcome to Conservative Corner. We are a monthly show on New TV representing the Newton Republican Party and the Republican Party of this district and this state and the United States of America. My name is Tom Mountain. I am the Republican State Committee man for this district, which includes Newton. And I was, until recently, the long-term chair of the Newton Republican City Committee. We are here tonight with a very esteemed former citizen of Newton, I should say, who was a long-term Republican activist, graduate of the Newton Public Schools, and currently now is the chair of the Wayland Republican Town Committee, where she moved to recently. And this, of course, is Ginny Gardner. And the two of us are in a good mood today for Republicans, which is rare these days, mainly because we both got our Christmas cards from Donald J. Trump from Mar-a-Lago, and we're very happy about that because we don't get much in the way of good news or good greetings, especially around the holidays, from anyone remotely affiliated with the White House these days. And I would add that having been to the White House for 4 years during the holiday celebrations over the past, during the Trump administration, it was a wonderful time to behold, but that was then, this is now, and the reality is the Republican Party is currently out of power in Washington, D.C., and in the city of Newton, and will soon be in the state. Now, I don't want to start off with that, shall we say, negative viewpoint, but we have to be realistic about things, folks, that this past year, we Republicans have not had a very good year. It's been a very bad year, and it's been a very bad year since the current occupant in the White House, one Joseph Biden, took over, so to speak. And we've been fighting with that and dealing with it ever since. We have all seen the downward trend that has been typical of our country since the Democrats took over. Inflation is through the roof. Our borders are wide open. Our foreign policy is disastrous. Gas prices are through the roof, and the so-called chain of supply chain is down and is disrupted, and nobody ever heard of a supply chain before the Biden administration. But that is the current state of affairs, and that has been the current state of affairs. But nevertheless, we are optimistic towards the future. Now, specific to the city of Newton, we have a unique situation which we have been dealing with for the last few years, and that is Newton is an official Republican-free zone. By that I mean, of the 33 elected positions in Newton, running from school committee all the way up to state senate, we do not have a single Republican in any of those positions for the first time, really, in generation, if ever. And Jim Cody tried, lone Republican, tried to make a comeback, but much to our dismay, it did not happen. So, for all intents and purposes, I represent the loyal opposition in Newton, which is the Republican Party, and we're trying real hard to make a comeback in this city. And we will get there eventually. But aside from the city, what we're noticing, on top of the, shall we say, the problems in the country that have obviously been brought on by Joe Biden and the Democrats, is really a disturbing trend that we've seen on a local, state, and national level, and that is really the cracking down of basic rights, specific basic free speech rights, basic rights of petition, basic rights of assembly. And we've seen this repeatedly again and again and again. In other words, our Bill of Rights has been under assault, primarily really from this Biden administration, but it trickles down to the local level. I'll give you some quick examples. On a national level, we of course had the so-called January 6th attack on the, as they call it, on the Capitol building. Now, that was not a very pleasant thing. We can all agree on that. However, here we are almost a year later, and we have hundreds of people that are still in jail, Their rights have been usurped. They are not receiving adequate treatment, adequate representation. Basically, the Bill of Rights doesn't and hasn't applied to these people, and they're still in jail without without any type of serious charges being levied against them. These are not murderers. These are not arsonists. These are not career criminals. These are people who, at best, at worst, shall we say, trespass on the Capitol grounds. Another example on a statewide level. There was a rally recently, and it was by a group called the Super Happy Fun Americans, led by one John Hugo, and it is a conservative group, and it's a free speech group. And what they basically did was they tried to have a rally, a free speech rally on Boston Common, and they were set upon by goons of all type from the left. They were set upon, brutalized. Several were sent to the hospital, and the police, from what we understand, basically stood by and did nothing on orders from, shall we say, the higher-ups. They were not allowed to speak, to give their, to exercise their freedom of assembly or freedom of speech. On the local level in Newton, the Newton schools have pretty much been taken over by the radical left. That has been coming for a very long time. I've been chronicling this since 2001 in the Newton tab, and afterwards as chair of the Newton Republican City Committee. And we have several times over the past few years challenged everyone from the school committee to the superintendent, to high school principals, to forums, to debates. By we, of course, I mean the Newton Republicans. If they either have refused outright or they have not responded at all. And our premise is we want our voice, our message to be heard by the students in the Newton schools, because they're not hearing anything about Republicans or any Republican message. All they hear about is what they hear from their very liberal teachers. And at this point, they won't even let us in the door. So it really is a part of a bigger theme, a bigger circle that I touched on before, and that is, again, the usurpation of basic rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights, which is under alarming threat by the powers that be. And Ginny, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And I have to tell you, George left at 3 o'clock this afternoon and began our walk here because gas has tripled since probably last January 2020. So we will be walking home, and I dug out the Christmas gift I plan to give George. It's our bug out bag so that we can safely make it home and have flares.
George is, of course, Mr. Gardner.
Mr. Gardner, so that we will be walking back home probably on Route 9. So thank you so much for inviting us. But, you know, truth of the matter is, everything you mentioned is so very true. Gasoline prices are, of course, through the roof. If nothing else, when you day one shut down 3 pipelines, what do you think is going to happen? And now we were energy efficient, we were selling our energy to Canada, and now we're begging people to give us oil. And we have gone through some of our reserve. So to me, if you take a step back and look at the big picture of this administration, it's mind-boggling. And if you say anything, and you're absolutely right, if you say anything, whether it's let's go Brendan, whatever, or the FJB, you're accused of being a hater, a bigot, or a member of the KKK, worse yet. And all of these things are happening. And we came from a time where we could sit across the table with the opposition and have a discussion and almost come to an agreement. But I fear those times are gone, and certainly we are not allowed into City Hall or a school committee or the State House because under the guise of the virus still, and we're sentenced to Zoom meetings, which if you dare to put your hand up, you're ignored and you're muted. So I really feel that our rights have been taken away from us, and it's something everyone should be up in arms about, because today it's the Republicans, tomorrow you're next.
You know, Ginny, you touched on something very local here as well, and that is the school committee. Just as we were sitting in the waiting room, the school committee hearings came on, and I noticed that they were doing it by Zoom. And they don't have to do it by Zoom. You and I are here live and in person, and we may or may not go to a restaurant where we'll be live there without wearing masks. But yet the school committee persists in having their Zoom meetings. And my feeling is that it's not because of COVID. They're using that as an excuse. They don't want swarms of people coming in for public comment and really pointing to them and speaking their mind, giving their testimony as to what's wrong with the school department, which there's plenty wrong with the school department. We won't get into it, aside from the fact that over 1,000 students have left the system. They had to cancel 9 kindergarten classes this year because so many people left or weren't coming back to the school system in Newton. But the point is that they don't want to have public meetings like that. And you alluded to the White House. They don't want to have public meetings in the State House, and they don't want to have public meetings in Washington, D.C. So it's really the stifling of a basic rights which are enshrined in our Constitution, and that is the freedom of assembly, and that is the ability of all of us to question and to point a finger at our elected officials and the powers that be, and have our voice heard. And we never noticed that before, if you recall. In the Trump administration, it was the exact opposite. Now, notice the difference also between how President Trump would deal with the press and how Joe Biden does.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, as an example, Trump would never shy away from the press. If he were walking out to the White House lawn to his helicopter, he would stop and respond to them all the time. He would respond to them all the time. Now, Joe Biden, what does he do? He has a script, and he actually has pictures of people that he's supposed to call on. The few times that he does have press conferences, which more often than not his secretary or press secretary handles the press. It's really appalling what's going on here.
It is appalling because, if people say, well, they're silencing the people that are hurtful or harmful, there's no way. Or that's the first one, freedom of press, freedom to assembly. When people cannot assemble together with signs and drink coffee, and that's generally what happens with our group. We assemble, we have our signs, you speak, and then we go for coffee. If we cannot do that, that's our basic constitutional rights, and they are chipping away one by one at the Constitution, and it's alarming. It's alarming to me because, first they're coming for us, but don't think for 1 minute you're off the hook, because they will come back. It's not just us.
Ginny, and I'm getting back to the free speech rally run by John Hugo a few weeks ago in Boston, where these people were set upon. They were brutalized.
Yes.
And Republican state committee people were there, and other dignified Republicans were there. And usually, again, the law enforcement will protect them, but they received orders to stand down. And these people, these Republicans, were brutalized. And I remarked to the organizer, John Hugo, I said, John, think of it. This is almost as bad as, if not worse than, the British occupation of Boston during 1775-76. Because, at the time, the British clamped down on everything and everyone. So the Sons of Liberty had to do things clandestinely. But they had the support of the population, and they certainly had the support of the press, but again, the authorities clamped down on the press. So it's as if we're in the cradle of liberty. We're reverting back to the bad old days of occupation at that time. And it's our own government officials that are doing that. It's the Democrats that are doing that. The Democrats who accuse Republicans of being fascistic, they're the ones who are really the fascists in this department.
Well, look at the numbers. And Mrs. Mountain is a real estate agent. She can tell you there's a lot of people that are fleeing, not just California, but they're fleeing Massachusetts and New York, absolutely. I spoke to a real estate agent in Florida, and he said, I love the governor of New York. He's given me more business than anybody I know. I'm very successful now. People are fleeing states such as this. And I predict that if things get really where they take away a lot of our constitutional rights, we're going to see a mass exodus, because no one wants to live where everything about your life is mandated. And I predict people will be going to such places as Florida, New Hampshire. I see a big change in this country, and to be honest, I'm kind of afraid of what could happen. Will we all stay together as one country? Will some people decide to go out on their own. Some states, will there be the South Dakota, Texas, Arizona, Florida, make up their own, go back to what they did when we were making the Constitution, which is each state did everything, and they didn't want to be part of America.
But, you know, Ginny, Ronald Reagan once said that the demise of liberty, and I'm paraphrasing, is just one generation away.
Yes.
And liberty and freedom have to be cultivated, and they have to be maintained in any democracy. And democracies that were very thriving prior to us, like in Greece and elsewhere, they ended up on the ash heap of history, which is not to say that it will happen here in America, but if the present trend continues, it very well could. And I'm not an alarmist, and I try not to be a pessimistic about the future of our country, but my eldest child, who married a Canadian, I reiterated to him, always keep your options open, that just in terms of relocating potentially to our neighbor to the north, where my ancestors' family had lived for 150 years. I'm of that genre from Prince Edward Island. But nevertheless, but again, I still get back to Ronald Reagan's hope that we are, as John F. Kennedy once said, the last best hope for mankind. And I believe that things can be corrected and turned around quickly. They can be, if we get rid of this administration in Washington. And the first step really happens with next year with the midterm elections. And by all accounts, we, the Republicans, should take back the House and the Senate easily if the elections are held fairly and if they're held legitimately. Now, some of the alarming trends which I'm noticing now, and I'm sure you are the same trends that happened in 2020, in that now with the COVID shutdowns, now we're facing the prospect of more shutdowns, nationally, locally, statewide, and nationally. And Joe Biden will speak about this, I guess, tomorrow night, which is Tuesday night. And what does that mean? That means more mail-in voting, more bulk mail-in voting, more absentee voting, et cetera, et cetera. And that's pretty much, I think, why we lost the election in 2020. If that happens again, then you can be sure of rampant voter fraud, of rampant indiscretions in the midterm elections next year, which is not to say that it will happen, but the potential is there. Yeah. And again, my prediction is that barring those circumstances, we should take back the House and the Senate by a wide margin, which will be great. And in which case, the Democrats will just control the executive wing. And in the state, I'm not counting on much with the Governor Baker not running for a re-election. So we're really focusing on and putting our hopes on the national scene, so to speak. And of course, locally, those elections are over as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you now. What do you think? Who do you think will be the Democratic ordained candidate, and will anyone else jump into the Republican mix for governor? Well,
you know, what's interesting about Joe Biden is you almost want to feel bad for him. and I think that now we're at the point where people are more angry at, shall we say, his handlers, even his family, his wife, for putting a man in that position who is obviously cognitively impaired, if not on the brink of senility. And we all have people like that in our family that we've seen over time. You know, the uncle who just mumbles at the Thanksgiving dinner, the grandmother who doesn't know what day it is, and et cetera, et cetera. And Joe Biden is in that category. Now, granted, he's not that old, comparatively speaking, but he has all the signs, and anyone with eyes can see that. So what does that mean? That simply means that they used him to get in the door because he was a former vice president. By they, I mean the radical left. They used him to get in the door. Now that they've used him to get in the door, they don't need him anymore, so they're using him as a puppet, and they're pulling all the strings. But they know that enough people, including Democrats, have voters' remorse, so they're not going to re-elect him again. So the question is, who are they going to put up in 2024? His Kamala Harris, it was disliked, unliked, however you describe it, before he chose her for vice president. She even had to drop out of the Democrat primaries, as you may recall. So I heard a frightening suggestion, and that would be Hillary Clinton.
I think so,
she
too.
may make a comeback. You know, and bear in mind from our side, Richard Nixon did that, and he did it with much success. But from the Republican side, and you and I spoke about this just briefly, and you can see the signs of what's happening and how. Donald Trump sent out a very nice
Beautiful.
gold engraved Christmas cards to you
cards.
and I today.
Yep. we
Now,
should have showed them.
I wish I had
but
mine,
we
I'm
forgot.
sorry.
But they are absolutely stunning.
But nevertheless, if you multiply that to how many
Oh, my
hundreds and
gosh.
thousands across the country, and
Yeah.
he's a private citizen, and they were sent from the Mar-a-Lago,
Yeah.
Florida area.
Right.
So that's a clear indication
Yeah.
that he is probably running again. And just anecdotal evidence like that and everything else, he is so much in the media, he is running again.
Yeah.
You know, listen, we didn't get cards from George W. Bush after he
After he
retired.
left office,
exactly.
yeah.
But nevertheless, well, of course, he was a two-termer. But nevertheless, and as I told to reporters last year, I said he could do Donald Trump could do a Grover Cleveland, and they looked at me like a deer in the headlights. Now, what does that mean? Well, Grover Cleveland was president in, I believe, the 1880s, and then he lost the election to Benjamin Harris, and then he came back and ran again and won. So it's been done before. And I think he will run, and I think he will be the nominee. And we'll see if he wins or not. And I think that if the election is fair and legitimate, he could and will win.
I think Hillary's going to run, and here's why I think she's going to run. Many people, many women too, did not like her. They felt she was cold and hard. Suddenly, she appears with her acceptance speech. She never got to read, and as she's reading it, she's breaking down and showing a very soft side of herself.
Yes, it's
to
all
appeal
contrived.
to and everything,
It's
as
all
you know, is
contrived.
orchestrated with the Clintons, and so I think that she's putting her cards in order to run again, and as everything she does is so orchestrated.
Yes, it
everything
is.
she
Yes,
does,
it is.
and they made her out to be kind of soft. My opinion, as a female, having run for office, and in being in a position where I'm chair, I was very insulted by her move to sob like that. And here's why. When a woman or lady runs for office, we are told, do not ever let them see you cry. Don't break down. And whatever you do, don't cry, and don't have a man come up and say, poor little Hillary, are you okay? Let's make it better. Here's my handkerchief.
Yes.
You have then basically told everyone, you can't do the job, you're a man. And I think that's what she did. And showing that she was the softer side of Hillary, in actual fact, she made herself look weak, to me.
That's interesting, but I also think it's very intuitive of you to notice that it was probably contrived, her emotional speech. If the Democrats really wanted to win, they should have somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard, the former Hawaii congresswoman.
True.
Somebody of that mindset, not some crazy leftist like they have so many of them out there. But however, in the event that Donald Trump doesn't run, which again I think he'll have to be struck by lightning to not run, it will be Ron DeSantis of Florida. And you know, Ginny, one thing I'd also like to mention, and it's really this really struck me. And I've met the governor, and this is pertaining to Texas. I met the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, a wonderful gentleman. And he took the extraordinary step of actually building a wall on the Texas border himself. And he was so smart about it. He's only building it on state land, number one, and private land that's from ranchers or farmers that are donating, giving it to the state government, so that the federal government can't stop him from doing it. And this is extraordinary, but this is how bad the crisis on the southern border is.
Horrible. And they're bringing in such lovely things as fentanyl. I think they said that they bring as much every day to kill everybody in Texas and California. They're bringing in drugs. They're killing our kids. They're killing your kids. And if this does not make you angry and tug at your heartstrings as people are burying, 18-year-old kids have a tendency not to die that young, or 35-year-old men or 40-year-old men. It is absolutely beyond disgraceful what is being brought into this country and that it's being allowed in.
You know, Ginny, had Donald Trump succeeded to a second term, that wall would have been built from San Diego all the way to Brownsville, Texas on the Gulf of Mexico. It would have been an impenetrable wall, meaning nobody could have got in. And that would have been something that would have been up for generations to come. That would have solved the problem completely. And then we would have had to deal with the illegals that are here, and you can deal with them over time. But now you're facing really a swarm, an onslaught of immigrants, illegals coming in across the border. And I tried to confront Elizabeth Warren when she was here in Newton on the fact that many of them are not tested for COVID and have and are carrying communicable diseases. And she, of course, her goons pushed me away, and I wasn't able to get the question in. But it's typical of her and the rest of them.
Yeah, a question that needs to be answered. And they're backing away, and they're not letting you speak. We go back to the same thing. It's the erasing, and it's happened so quickly, of our rights. You should have been able to ask that question.
That's
you should not have been
but
pushed away.
I was pushed away.
You're a citizen.
By her burly security guards. I was pushed away by them, and they threatened to sic the police on me, which the police in Newton certainly wouldn't have. That is our conclusion for this show, and we appreciate you tuning in. We hope that you will in the coming year. We always have a good time here, and please tell your friends about this Conservative Corner. You can look it up, and we are always here at your service. And we wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And for those Republicans among you, bear in mind, do not despair. 2022 will be our year. We're confident of it. We believe in it, and we believe in our party. We believe in the future of our country, and we will catapult to 2024. We've been through dark times like this before with the Carter administration, and then we got Ronald Reagan with the Obama administration, and then we got Donald Trump. So we will be back, and we will be back and better than before. Thank you.